Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me for this one-of-a-kind training. We are expecting a full crowd tonight, so sit back, get ready to take wonderful notes, and change the way that you look at banks and money for the rest of your life. This is intended to change how you bank. It is significantly faster, it is significantly less expensive, and it is significantly safer than what you've been taught. This class is known as how to own homes with no loans and reduce the price of every rental by 25% or more. Now, the objectives of this evening's training include a brief narrative about VIP. I want to give you some basic background about our company here. Then I want to turn our attention on how to obtain unlimited capital, which we use to exponentially grow cash flow. Next, I'm going to show you specifically 3 steps that we've been using now for roughly a dozen years to dominate the banks and put as much as 80% of mortgage and non-mortgage interest costs right back in our pockets. And finally, we're going to discuss how you can buy more properties and then own them without any loans at all. Sounds pretty good, right? So thank you very much for being on this training. Looking forward to diving in. If you've not yet become familiar with VIP, you're about to learn something amazing. We were actually founded back in 2000, and we now teach tens of thousands of people every month similar types of banking secrets which can transform your financial picture in a fraction of the time. We became known as leading cash flow, debt, and credit experts, and we've now taught in actually over 25 countries, so there are people enjoying this all over the world. You can certainly go online and find additional information by just doing a general Google search of VIP financial education. Now, I am going to break this training into 2 parts. So the second part is going to be a courtesy and a gift to you. So stay tuned on how to register for that. It is a remarkable one-on-one 90-minute phone-based coaching session. So if you register for that coaching session somewhere else, it will not be honored. So make sure you only register for that coaching session using the special link website that I give you here tonight. I want to help you jumpstart using this information. I have to warn you in advance that this can be confusing to learn. I do want to reassure you, however, that it is easy to implement with proper guidance. Therefore, there are 2 things that I'm going to include in order to assist you. The first is known as the Cash Flow Cruncher. That's this acronym here, CFC. The Cash Flow Cruncher can be found at cashflowcruncher.com, and you can see that spelled here at the top, cashflowcruncher.com. And you can actually start inserting your information into our quick start guide. Otherwise, download the full spreadsheet. Either way will get us the information that we need in order to assist you. Next, I want to just make you aware of some of the organizations that have recognized the power of this information. Not only have we taught this for some of the largest and most recognized associations regarding real estate across the country, such as National Real Estate Investor Association, NASA, through Johnson & Kennedy Space Centers has even adopted this education. We've taught this to the police department. We teach it to RE/MAX, to Your Castle, Coldwell Banker, Keller Williams, and the list goes on and on. In fact, there's a really great review that you can find online from the Chief of Police, Mr. Jim May. So I would recommend checking that out. You can also find our A+ Better Business Bureau rating under VIP Enterprises in Denver. And here's what we're here to learn, folks. What Josh Hansen, a CPA out of Denver, Colorado, learned, which was how to pay off his first rental property in 21 months. I would recommend VIP to anybody. How would you like to take a 15, 20, or 30-year loan and compress it to a fraction of the time? I'm going to show you how to mathematically accomplish that here without making any sacrifices to your lifestyle and without the need to make more money. So how do you actually benefit from this training? We've all attended trainings either online or in person, and we've left the room thinking, wow, that was either great, I've learned some things, but we often go back to our everyday lives without applying. And I want to make sure that you apply what you learn here today. So how do you actually benefit from this training? First of all, your undivided attention is necessary. So write your notes down, include your questions in there, because as long as you register for the second part of the training here this evening, that will be customized for you. All your questions will be answered, and it is first come, first serve. As I mentioned, if you visit this website by the end of this training, and reserve your free coaching session, you will be given 90 minutes for free with absolutely no sales pitch, no obligation, and you can find that under freesessioncalendar.com. Now, there are a few deal breakers, so please do not register for that just yet. Make sure that you have these qualifiers met. Number one, you've got to have an average of at least $500 per month in discretionary cash flow. That's not every month. That's an average throughout the year. So what you want to do is add all of your income streams together. You can do this directly on the Cash Flow Cruncher spreadsheet. Put all forms of revenue, whether you have a job, whether you earn rental income, whether you have odd ends of revenue, include it all. Then you're going to include all of your expenses, your debt servicing, your household costs, automobile costs, discretionary spending, and business-related expenses. And once those are subtracted from your revenue, you need to average at least $500 per month positive. If you are not yet there, that's the very first priority to benefit from what I'm going to be teaching you guys here today. Number two, do you have a mortgage now or plan to get at least one mortgage within the next 18 months? This doesn't have to be a mortgage on a rental property. This can be this can be a mortgage on your primary residence. Anyone that has a home loan will benefit substantially from what we're going to be covering here today. Now, there are a number of personality requirements to succeed with this as well, too. So I want to make sure that we touch on those. First of all, make sure that you're coachable. During that 90-minute coaching session, come in ready to learn ways of changing behavior to get substantial benefit. That will include a requirement to have courage. This is not going to be a walk in the park for everybody. It can be scary. Even a dozen years into practicing this myself, I still from time to time find myself a little nervous about some of the techniques that I'm about to try, which I have not used before. However, the math will always become the GPS. 2 plus 2 always equals 4. So we're looking for the mathematically safest and mathematically fastest route to accomplishing both long and short-term goals more quickly. That doesn't happen without consistency and discipline, however. So you've got to be prepared to make permanent changes to your behavior, which also requires patience because there is no finish line. Think of this like your financial nutrition plan. I'm going to create a much more nutritious plan for your finances that does not include you giving up your lifestyle. In fact, if anything, it's going to enhance it. But you've got to follow it on a consistent, regular basis and plan to do so until you pass away. Now, as long as you're confident in these requirements, then you cannot fail with what we're going to cover. So again, for a limited time only, you can get the second part of today's training for free at freesessioncalendar.com. And I've agreed to do something very special on today's training only, which is that for all who register, you will get your free session with me personally. My name again is Matthew Pillmore. I'm the president of the company, one of the lead architects within the design of the process and systems that we use in order for this information to succeed. So this is a big deal. I do not have a lot of free time, so I want to make sure that you guys take advantage of this and can really tap into my resources in order to benefit yourselves. This is the phone number that you can call if you have any trouble registering through this website. We're there to help you, okay? All right, let's go ahead and keep moving forward. Again, freesessioncalendar.com. You want to visit that before the training ends on this webinar. I want to transition our attention now to the 3 steps that we're using to succeed in dominating the banks. Essentially, we're just turning the banks against each other. And make no mistake, we love the banks, but we certainly wouldn't love them if we were continuing to do things the way we used to do them, or the way that the vast majority of the population chooses to bank. So I want to show you why we love them. First and foremost, we focus our attention on a perpetual optimization of both personal and business credit. Not just the scores, but the profiles. This is very, very important in order to leverage into what we call debt weapons. So you'll see this acronym, or you'll hear me use the term debt weapons throughout the training. We're going to learn about debt weapons on today's workshop. However, those are really one of the key pieces to bridging the gap between the tug of war of, do I invest my money in new assets or do I pay down my debt? When you have $1, it feels as if you have to make a choice. And what we're ultimately doing is leaning on leverage to acquire assets, but then we are reducing and eliminating the cost of the borrowing of that money by accelerating the elimination of the balances. And it's a phenomenal outcome. In fact, when we utilize these debt weapons properly, not only do we eliminate debts and other liabilities in a fraction of the time, we grow our assets significantly more quickly, but we also are able to stockpile emergency reserves far more quickly than the average person does. So there literally are no downsides to this. Not only are we accelerating things, but we're doing so while simultaneously reducing the risk. And there are three main techniques that we rely on. The first is known as lump sum payments. Now, lump sum payments are where we take a specific dollar amount from our debt weapons and apply it towards our financial objective. We'll learn more about that in a moment. Next is paycheck parking. Paycheck parking is the act of replacing the inadequate bank accounts that we're currently relying on with accounts that offer us substantially more advantages. And finally, the result of this process is what we call cash flow stacking. This is where we're optimizing the asset side of the balance sheet while also optimizing the liability minimization side of the balance sheet, therefore seeing our cash flow margin extend well beyond what it would have if we were only concentrating on one side or the other. So let's dive in and focus on the first step. You probably have personal credit scores established. These scores are imperative to your success. You should know that by now. I was lucky enough in the early 2000s to have an opportunity to invest in a mentorship with one of the original creators of the Fair Isaac credit scoring algorithm. And it led to me becoming the youngest certified FICO credit scoring expert in the country at the age of 23. Since that time, I've been traveling the country teaching on the art of optimizing credit. Now, we have a unique approach to doing this where we focus on all 5 elements of the credit score versus a credit repair organization that tends to concentrate only on removing negative and inaccurate information from the report. The minimum credit score that we want to target is 760 and above. So 760 is the objective for everybody. Once you have a 760 and above, the goal is to protect and maintain it there. Like I said earlier, it's a perpetual process of optimizing credit. In order to take advantage of the second and third steps in this 3-step process, we need at least a 700. So again, if we don't have the cash flow or we don't have at least a 700, those become the first priorities in this process. And as I'd mentioned previously, we've learned many, many ways of manipulating your credit profiles in order to see the credit scores respond the way that we need them to. Even more important than the scores we've learned are profiles. We've got to make sure that we help you look and sound the way that the banks want you to, because it provides us access to tremendous amounts of money. I do want to reassure everybody that if you don't have perfect credit, it's okay. There are credit maximization solutions that are far more effective than credit repair. So this is not a deal breaker when it comes to your complimentary coaching session. Make sure that you go to the website I provided to register for that free coaching session as soon as possible. I do believe that we are booking out several weeks at this point at a minimum, so make sure you're willing to look out a ways if necessary. Now, this is where you're going to track down your FICO scores. You can, from time to time, get FICO scores from current credit card providers or from your banks. However, not all banks or credit cards do provide them, and usually they will only be providing a score, not a report. In most cases, they'll only update that once every couple months too. So this is where you can go at any point, spend $20 per bureau, and get your actual scores and credit reports. myfico.com. This is direct from the source. If you want to get free credit, and this is where I would start. I don't want anybody spending money on today's call. So I would always visit creditkarma.com before. This doesn't cost any money, and it provides you both scores and reports. The difference is that this is your Vantage credit score versus your FICO credit score. So they're using a different algorithm to calculate the scores through each bureau. So just be aware of that there can be substantial differences. For the longest period of time, I had a 50-point or more margin between my FICO and Credit Karma Vantage credit scores. So it doesn't necessarily tell you where you are according to what the banks see, but keep in mind that banks are looking at FICO 90% of the time. So it is important for us to have a general idea of where you start off, before we go out and start accessing debt weapons. So write these websites down. These will be terrific resources for you moving forward. Now, there are two big reasons that we concentrate on credit. The first is it reduces expenses. Everybody knows this. Interest rates are better with better credit. Insurance premiums are better with better credit. But I think there is far too little attention spent on the ability to enhance borrowing power by having terrific credit. With a 700 plus FICO credit score, we get access to tons of personal and business debt weapons. We're going to talk about debt weapons next. I do want to point out before we dive in that there is even a subcategory of debt weapons that do not report to your personal credit report, which we help our coaching members get access to. So this is a very important piece to this puzzle, that with a personal guarantee, we can avoid the reporting of some of these accounts, therefore having no impact on our debt to income ratios and having no impact on our credit scores when we choose to use that account. And we'll use those accounts for a wide variety of reasons. Everything from down payments on new properties, to holding costs while we're doing repairs, to vacancy costs when tenants move out, to emergency reserves when unexpected circumstances happen, to growing multiple businesses, everything from staffing to technology to marketing to simply supplementing in negatively cash flowing months. So this is a really important aspect to our plan. So let's talk about the second step in this process, leveraging credit in order to access these incredible tools. So what the heck are these debt weapons? Let's uncover them. These are both personal and business capital accounts, which will put your money to work for you nearly every day of the year. What these will allow investors and business owners alike to rapidly improve starts with your cash flow. There is no single more important number to you financially than how much money you have left over at the end of the month once all of your bills are paid. That's discretionary income. We call this cash flow. Now, cash flow equals choices. One thing I can conclude after having thousands of one-on-one conversations with investors just like you is that people who have cash flow have options and people who don't have cash flow do not. So cash flow is the single most important number for us to be focusing on. Number two, this will rapidly improve your ability to acquire new assets, whether that be real estate, whether that be other forms of assets, or whether that be growing other types of businesses. Third, safety in the event of emergencies. We can rely on these accounts to protect us. Fourth, debt to income ratios. And fifth, total debt load and interest costs. Guess what? Debt to income ratios will always play a role in your ability to succeed through the bank's eyes. And if we can get rid of your debt load and put up to 80% of the interest costs on your mortgages and non-mortgage related debts back in your pocket, for most people, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in some cases, even millions. Now, I do want to forewarn everybody that if you have had trouble recently with fiscal responsibility, this is not the education for you. You want to limit your access to debt weapons if you cannot manage them in a way that will create progress for your financial objectives. These are not intended to be used in a frivolous or casual lifestyle way. These are intended to be used to grow cash flow. Now, here's why it's risky, and here's why it's also so successful for people like us. We are looking at getting access to an average of $25,000 up to $250,000 of new liquid capital every single year. And what we have found is that there are 16 different categories of these debt weapons and hundreds of various types inside of those categories. Each debt weapon serves a different purpose. Think of it like automobiles or motor vehicles. There are many different types of motor vehicles, but they all have different purposes. I certainly wouldn't want to show up to sail across the ocean with a pickup truck, but I wouldn't bring my boat to haul a load. I would rather have the truck. So you have to recognize that the same ideas and principles apply on the financial equivalent. Furthermore, we're never done adding more. There is no such thing as having access to too much money if you are fiscally responsible. These accounts involve everything from installment to revolving, everything from secured to unsecured, everything from personal to business. They work for entrepreneurs and business owners. They work for the W-2 wage earners. They work for the young. They work for the old, but they always require cash flow. Next, this is really why people lean on us, because there are 4 questions that have to be answered correctly before we submit our next application for each debt weapon. And again, we're never done adding more. We want this proverbial bunker where we can just slide the door open and we've got an airplane and a helicopter and a boat and a jet ski and a snowmobile and several different types of automobiles and a motorcycle and a scooter, and all of them serve different purposes, but we want the financial equivalent of these. And when they cost little to no money to get, there's no downside. But we've got to make sure that we can first answer the question, what is it going to be used for? If we're unable to understand the purpose of the new debt weapon, why are we applying for it in the first place? Which then allows us to answer the second and third questions in line, which are, which one do we get? Which debt weapon is best for this purpose? And who's providing it? Where do we get it from? We've got to source it so we know where to submit the application. And the final question when we get access to debt weapons is, when do we apply? When do we apply for this? Recognize that every time we submit an application, it hurts our credit scores. So if we're looking to have credit extended to us, a hard inquiry is generally pulled, and it can have an impact on our credit. So we have to be very careful when it comes to the timing. Normally, the frequency with which we're acquiring this $25,000 to $250,000 every year is 2 to 8 new accounts each year. 2 to 8 new accounts each year. Now, in order to understand the value of these debt weapons, just how important they are, I've got to change what you've likely been taught about interest rates. It's incredible to me when I travel around and speak to large groups of real estate investors every week, how ingrained it is in our minds that interest rates are the single most important aspect of borrowing. But where did we get that education? My experience is that almost all of us learned what we know about money and banks from the banks or our parents, who also learned from the banks and their parents. It's this cyclical, broken pattern of misinformation and undereducation. And all of us would agree that the school systems deprive us of the formal financial education that we deserve in schools. Therefore, we're kind of pushed out into the real world underprepared, and we're just kind of left to fend for ourselves. And we go to the banks and we trust them to give us the right information. But wouldn't you agree that the banks aren't building their rules to benefit us? So as a result, we focus our energy and our efforts on things that most of the time end up benefiting the banks, where if we just had a different perspective, it could mean the difference between tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and in some cases even millions of dollars. So I challenge you to think about interest in a different way. Don't worry about the rate as much as you worry about the total interest costs. The argument that I make is, you don't care as much about the rate as you think you do. You just care about the total dollars and cents you're going to end up spending. That's why sometimes I ask people, would you rather have a 10% loan or a 5% loan? And almost everybody leans initially towards the 5% loan. But if we define the terms of that loan and say that the 5% is paid off in 360 months, but the 10% is paid off in 9 months or 10 months, now which one do you want? And almost everybody changes their answer. So you already know, common sense has you understanding that interest costs are what are most important. But the banks, through their propaganda and persistent marketing of refinancing, have kind of led us down a path where today the single most common question I get is, what's the rate? We're going to stop caring about the rate. We're going to care about interest costs. And I'm going to save you a lot of money in the next portion of this training. So listen up. We want to walk through these 3 techniques: lump sum payments, paycheck parking, and cash flow stacking. I want to show you one of the favorite ways of utilizing these debt weapons for me. This never fails to impress me and everyone else, and I do not think you're going to be the exception here today. Now, I want to start with real estate. How do we own real estate free and clear? How do we reduce the cost of every rental by over 25%? And how do we put up to 80% of the total interest costs on mortgages and non-mortgage debts back in our pockets? Well, for us to get an understanding, we've got to first look at the truth in lending statement. This shows you everything you need to see. First of all, I'd like to share this story. This is a real case study about Dan and Megan Albright. I won't go too much into their backstory, but I absolutely love this couple. Been working with them for years now, and they have authorized us to be able to share their story. They've made terrific headway using what we teach, and frankly, they thought there was no hope when they first attended a training similar to the one that you're in now. And here's why. Well, let me just point out that when I first met Megan, she was very concerned about their non-mortgage related debts. They did not yet have a home mortgage. They were working towards getting their first property, a primary residence. They wanted to live in it. And it was going to be their very first home. And they were absolutely heartbroken that they didn't think it was ever going to happen. So we ended up getting them there, and it took 3 years, but here's where we stood 3 years later. You can see here a 30-year fixed loan. It was a $290,000 mortgage on their property. It was at 5.2%. And take a look. This is the Truth in Lending. This is Megan Albright up here. You can see Truth in Lending statement. This is the software that mortgage professionals rely on. And this is what they see. And you can see here the problem. You see at 5.2%, the total amount of interest that Dan and Megan are going to end up spending is $283,272. How is that okay? You know the problem, guys, is we all see this. We see this document before we get our mortgages. You will remember this as you think back. We go to our closing table, we sign the documents, we look at this one again. It's obviously, a cause of a bit of panic. And instead of having a full-blown anxiety attack, we sign it, move through the documents, go home, put it in our file cabinet, suppress it, and then start walking around bragging about the fact that we have historic low interest rates. Who cares about the rate? If you're going to end up spending almost what you borrow in interest costs, isn't that a problem for you? Now, this is why it's such a problem in my opinion, because over 360 months, they're going to end up spending well over $500,000 on this property, closer to $600,000. And what we've identified over the last decade are a collection of ways of doing this better, where there are roughly half a dozen different methods to rapidly accelerating the elimination of this debt. The thing you've got to understand is there are ways that work better for some people and better for others, and we don't have a dog in the race. So our coaching members are held accountable to the plan that works the best for them. Every plan is different from the next. Every roadmap is different from the next. I want to show you the one that I like the best. So while there are a lot of ways of doing this better, I'm going to walk you through the paycheck parking process. Now, here is the same information that you saw on that slide, but if you'll take a look with me here on the right, the debt weapon status of Dan and Megan at this time had grown to $78,500 of availability. You can see that was through a collection of credit cards. They also had a couple unsecured personal credit lines that we helped them get access to. Very special functionality. They're not all the same. Not all credit cards are the same. Not all lines of credit are the same. So we have to walk them through what's best for them. And you could see that they were averaging around $25,000 a year, but they had some credit challenges initially that we had to work through. They fill out their cash flow cruncher, and we see that they have $5,950 in net take-home income. And I'm going to show you that on their cash flow cruncher here in just a few slides. Here's their mortgage payment. We rounded it up just to be really conservative with everything. And you can see their average living expenses came out to $2,325. Pardon me. Now, the way we calculate cash flow is we take the total sum of all of their income, take-home income, and we subtract the total of all of their expenses. And that number ends up as a new net average cash flow position of about $2,025 per month. This was almost 5 times better than the night that I met Megan. They started at $390 average cash flow. Can you believe that? So in just 3 years, their cash flow improved by almost 500%. And that was without making any more money and without cutting back in lifestyle. Pardon me. Okay. So the next step in our process is we calculate the maximum lump sum. The maximum lump sum is the maximum dollar amount that we can safely borrow from the debt weapon. So we talked about lump sum very early on. So I want to know how much I can borrow from this $78,500 to accomplish the goal of rapidly eliminating the mortgage that they just took. We will calculate your MLS for you. In their case, it was a $20,000 sum. So we were able to calculate a $20,000 lump sum MLS that we will use from these debt weapons to attack this mortgage. You can see here from this unsecured personal credit line, which means it's not collateralized with a property. It's not a home equity line of credit. It's not a credit card. We have total liquidity. We can use it for any reason we want to. And in their case, we're going to take 20 from the 25 available, and we're going to apply it towards this mortgage. Now, I just want to reassure you, if you get lost during this example, that is normal, which is why you need to reserve your free coaching session, because it doesn't matter if you're lost or not. The math still works. So the last thing you want to do is get frustrated because you're not following along closely enough and go back to doing things the prehistoric way. If you keep banking the way you're banking now, you are the bank's sucker. Bottom line. What we want to do is exploit the banks, make it a far more mutually beneficial relationship between us. So just bear with me, follow along the best you can. If you get lost, it's okay, it's normal. And that's why you have us, because we're going to keep pushing you through it, okay? So we've got $290,000 balance. We just applied $20,000 to. Now, when we apply $20,000 to this balance, it reduces it to roughly $270,000. But this balance has now increased from $0 to $20,000. So you can see we have the exact same amount of debt, $290,000. It's just dispersed differently. We're essentially being proactive borrowers. I can't impress it upon you strongly enough that most people are just very passive about their banking. We are taught we should be doing things a certain way. We follow that plan blindly and ultimately spend way too much. So we're going to be a lot more proactive now. It does not take a lot of time to do this. So there's not much demand of you to make this work. We've got $20,000 we just applied here. Now, when Dan and Megan get paid their money, they normally go straight to the bank and deposit it into checking and savings accounts. You might do the same thing. Most people do. If I were to ask you how content you are with the monetary value of your checking and savings accounts, I already know what your answer would be. If I were to ask you how long do the banks want to keep you in debt, I already know what your answer would be. So if we put our money in checking and savings accounts for 20 to 28 days of the month on average, the American public allows their money to sit in those accounts idly, working for the banks but not working for us. During that period of time, which happens to be 3 to 4 weeks of every month, 3 weeks of every month is 3/4 of every year, or 3/4 of your lifetime that your money is sitting unemployed or is simply working for the banks. And one thing a lot of people don't understand is banks have permission per the Federal Reserve to lend up multiple times what you deposit. The last number I heard is up to 9 times what we deposit into checking and savings accounts can be lent out to other borrowers, which, when you think about it, is fraud. Now, we're not here to try and fix a broken system. What we are here to do is take control over what we can control, which is our own household. So now Dan and Megan are going to take their income here and they're going to paycheck park it instead of in a checking or savings account, which is what most of us do. They paycheck park it against the $20,000 debt weapon balance, which brings down the average daily balance throughout the month, preventing compound interest on that account, therefore basically making Dan and Megan the bank. They're standing in the way of the bank collecting interest costs unnecessarily. And for the same 20 to 28 days that the average person is allowing their money to sit unemployed, Dan and Megan are maximizing cash flow, reducing enormous amounts of interest costs, compressing their amortization schedules into a timeline that you will have a hard time believing, and maximizing their credit scores. There is no added danger to what I'm teaching as long as you do it correctly. And at the end of the month, we pay all of the bills the same way that we were before. We wash, rinse, and repeat this process. So let me demonstrate here. We've got $59.50 that's earned, which would normally go and sit idly in checking and savings, whereby instead we paycheck park it against this $20,000. Now, when we apply $20,000 to this mortgage balance, that counts as that month's mortgage payment. The $59.50 gets paycheck parked against this balance, which counts as this month's payment on the debt weapon. You can see that it reduces the balance to roughly $14,050. This is an estimate because obviously we're using averages here. So you can see this $20,000 balance where there was only $5,000 remaining on this account now comes down to $14,000, and now there's $11,000 available. Now we pay our bills. Now almost all of the expenses are being paid for by a credit card that gets paid off in full every month. So these other debt weapons are being used to pay all of the monthly expenses And before that bill is due, it gets paid in full. Now, when you pay a credit card in full, you should know by now that you don't pay any interest at all. So not only does it buy us a float, but it also gives us an opportunity to earn massive rewards and earn hundreds or even thousands of dollars per year in cash back, travel rewards, or gift points that will supplement holiday and birthday presents. Now, when we add the living expenses cost to pay off the credit card back into the balance, you can see it increases back to $16,375, as you can see here, and the availability has now decreased slightly. We paycheck park in month number 2 as well. Average of $59.50 gets put in, and now all of the expenses come out because we have another mortgage payment. The average living expenses get paid, and by the end of that second month, we're at roughly $14,350 as a new balance. Now, it's very easy for me to expedite the rest of this cycle and speed up this example because every month now, $59.50 gets paycheck parked against the balance, and every month $39.25 gets pulled out for expenses, leaving the cash flow behind paycheck parked against this balance each and every month. So I can just divide the remaining balance of $14,350 by the current cash flow position to determine roughly how many additional months this cycle will take to pay back. And we've got 7.1 as the result. Now we're going to go ahead and add in month 1 and month 2 that we walked through together. Okay, we don't want to forget those in this term, in this timeline. We want to try and decide how long this is taking. And the only other thing that we haven't factored in, we already accounted for the payments every month, but we haven't accounted for the interest costs on this $20,000 debt weapon. So we're going to use a higher interest rate. I'm going to use that 10% rate I was talking about earlier, which over a period of about 9.5 months is going to be costing roughly $1,000 in interest. Less than that, but through the paycheck parking process, of course. So in under 10 months, this $20,000 has been paid back. What do you think we do next? That's right, we're going to repeat the process. Now, this doesn't seem all that impressive on the surface until you understand this here. This is known as an amortization schedule, one of the most insidious devices ever created by mankind, according to some. Here's why. This is year 0, and this is year 30, and take a look at this. When's the last time you pulled out your mortgage statement and saw just how much money was going toward interest versus principal? Guys, what did we do with Dan and Megan? Well, in month number 1, we took $20,000, and again, this can be your primary residence, this can be done on all of your mortgages for your rental properties, and this can be even the same process that we use on your non-mortgage related debts. That includes credit card balances, auto loans, student loans, all of those balances that haunt you. Let's face it, the debt bothers everybody. If you're trying to pretend that you're not bothered by your debt, then you're fooling yourself. And I'm here to break the news that unlike what I was taught by Robert Kiyosaki through the Rich Dad education, there is no such thing as good debt. All debt is evil. But leverage is the single greatest ingredient to wealth creation. So how do we benefit from leverage while preventing the risks of debt? The answer is all about how we repay. In month 1, Dan and Megan gave $20,000 that wasn't theirs. If they had just been paying normally each month for 10 months, they would have missed the opportunity to leapfrog from where they started all the way down to about 4.5 years later. So you can see in the very first month, it's as if they're paying the same principal as they would be paying if they were in the loan for 4.5 years. And they just started it. 10 months later, this initial $20,000 lump sum cycle is paid back, and we get to do it again. So in month 10, we leapfrog all the way down to almost year 8, and we do it again 10 months later, and we do it again 10 months later, and we hack this amortization schedule into itty-bitty pieces. Now, is this disrupting their investment goals? Absolutely not. This is allowing them to invest even faster, because not only are they preventing all this interest, but in a handful of short years, they get all the cash flow from the principal and interest on this, making their investment objectives even easier because of their debt to income ratios. Credit scores are through the roof, and it's the capital that we continue to get for them, which allows them to continue to go out and make down payments. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that before the training is done. We've got about 15 or 20 minutes left, so just bear with me. Now, if they were to go all the way through to completion, and we're not going to show you the result quite yet. I want to actually walk you through their cash flow cruncher, because again, if I just show you charts or if I just show you concept on a slide, it doesn't really sink in. I want to show you the actual mathematics. So here's Dan and Megan's cash flow cruncher. This is what you will be provided as a gift when you register for your free 90-minute one-on-one coaching session with me. Again, you've got about 15 to 20 minutes left to do that. So make sure you get on the calendar as soon as possible. Here's their cash flow summary page. You can see this is broken into a number of tabs here at the bottom, like any other spreadsheet. The cash flow summary page is non-editable, so this information is just simply imported over from these other tabs. And you can see their net cash flow position here, exactly what we were discussing. You can see their revenue and assets here. Dan has 1099 income. Megan's is a little more consistent at W-2'd, which is why we're always operating with averages. There is no excuse just because you don't have consistency. Operate in averages. You can see where their credit is input here. You can see on their debts page, they've got their new mortgage. But additionally, you can see just how much money we've managed to collect over the last few years. $309,000 of availability at this point in money that they never had access to before. And that's not even counting the credit cards that are all listed down below, almost $50,000 more that are available to them. Now, they're only using these credit cards to support their monthly expenses and then pay the balance in full. So these are always paid in full. Are there any disadvantages to having access to this when the balances are paid in full? Absolutely not. So this is a tremendous collection for them to be able to expand their investing, which is exactly what they've done. Now, we're not quite there in this example yet, but I do want to show you what they're doing, because they're taking $20,000 from here and we're applying it here in those lump sum increments every 10 months to accomplish this result. You can see here the loan calculator where their data has been put in. 5.2% over 30 years is going to cost them that $283,000 in interest. They have absolutely no desire to pay that. And here we are. You can see everything that's wrong with amortization schedules here. Do you take notice of this interest to principal? $1,253 per month in interest versus just $338 in principal. And as you can see, the increase to principal each month is less than $2. It's actually less than $1.50, which is why it takes 360 months and why they're going to end up making $283,000 off of Dan and Megan unless they choose to do something about it, which is exactly what they've done. In month number 1, they gave $20,000. Now I'm going to apply this in month number 3 so that you can witness for yourself the leapfrog impact that has here on the principal column. As I tab that in, and by the way, this comes from a debt weapon. They borrow this money, we paycheck park and pay this $20,000 back in less than 10 months, and 10 months later they apply another 20. But do you see here that this jumps them from $337 in principal all the way to $426 in principal, almost $90 difference versus just $1.50 or $3 between these 2 months. And the best news about this is that Dan and Megan have just saved themselves $64,000 off of the price tag of this home. $64,000. If I came to you and said, listen, I can get you access to a collection of properties where you will get a reduction off of the retail price of $64,000 guaranteed, regardless of the condition of the property, would you be interested? Absolutely, you would be interested. And you know what? They get to do this again 10 months later. So let's go from payment 3 to payment 13 and apply another $20,000 in here to see the impact. Boom. Look at this. They leapfrog from $441 to $432, but even better yet, they are saving now $110,000 or $109 and change off of the price tag of this home. How would you like to shave $100,000 off of the price of your homes? And this is only the second step. They're only 11 months in technically on this loan. We're going to go to payment 23 and do the same thing again. $20,000. So this is less than 2 years in on this loan, and they're already preventing almost $150,000 worth of interest costs. I can just keep going and going. But instead of doing that, let me just show you the result here. You can see that the $283,000 in original interest that they would have had to pay on this one home alone now becomes only $72,500. Absolutely astonishing. This saves them over $200,000 on this one property and avoids over 21 years worth of payments. In fact, it puts them in almost exactly 8.5 years before they own this home free and clear. Now, whether you have $100,000 mortgages or $1 million mortgages, all it is are additional zeros. We're here to say that this works for anything. It also works for non-mortgage related and business debts. This is where Dan and Megan sat when we first met her 3 years before they bought their first home. And this was the reason that Megan was so emotional about their circumstances. They had $14,400 in credit card balances combined with roughly $35,000 of two automobile loans. And this total comes out to be almost 50 grand. Now, if I ask an audience whether or not they think that's a lot, most think it is. And yet when you really look at this breakdown, this is pretty normal. We see this all the time, if not much worse. You can see their credit scores were poor, 668, needed work. Cash flow was only $390 on average. We only had $9,750 available at the time, and income was exactly what it is today. Overall, really, really poor profile, including a poor borrowing strength. Now, speculate with me. With just $390 in average cash flow each month and $50,000 in non-mortgage related balances, if Dan and Megan don't change their behavior, if they don't come in with courage, and if they're not consistent and patient through this process, how optimistic are you that they would be able to pay off this 50 grand in debt and be non-mortgage related debt free within 10 years? What about within 20? Is there a possibility they would never be debt free if they don't change behavior? You better believe it. So with a little bit of guidance, we get them started in our coaching, and guess what? We end up in a 12.7 month cycle where we apply a lump sum amount towards these balances, gets paid back in 12.7 months. The second cycle gets paid back in 10.2 months. And the next lump sum payment and paycheck parking balance is paid back in just 8 months for the third cycle, which totals just 30.9 months before Dan and Megan not only have a 781 FICO score, but you can see they have absolutely no debt keeping them up at night any longer. Their new cash flow position is roughly $2,035. We've got $78,500 in availability of debt weapons. Borrowing strength is strong. They're ready to go out and get that mortgage. They start investing in real estate as of spring of last year. Guys, night and day. Night and day. Now, you may not be in a fiscally challenged place like Dan and Megan were. In fact, it's better if you're not. It's better if you have a lot of cash flow, if you have great credit, if you have limited to no non-mortgage related balances. This is tailor-made because the worst mortgage, the one that we want to attack and start to accomplish results with, are your mortgages. Those are the worst debts that you can have, are the mortgages. So we've got to get through the non-mortgage related balances first in order to start attacking and eliminating those mortgages. Here's a couple frequently asked questions for you as we wrap up. Number one, why not apply the extra cash flow to the principal? That's a good question. We get that question all the time. You know that if you just took the extra money and applied it towards principal, it would pay the balances down and you would save a lot of interest. While applying the extra cash flow consistently will prevent similar interest savings and timelines, doing so will restrict all investing goals. There will no longer be any access to cash. Relying on debt weapons gives investors and business owners a unique ability to remain liquid, to invest and eliminate debt simultaneously. Obviously, this is a better approach if you consider that as the result. Number two, where do debt weapons come from? Debt weapons are provided both in and out of typical lending institutions, and while most banks provide varying types and quantities of debt weapons, they change regularly. They're all designed to work a different way. So having a professional guide you to the correct vehicles at the correct time is key to your success with this. Number three, does this work for self-employed? Due to the consistency of income, having a job and being W-2'd will always aid in the ability to get more lenders in your corner. However, highly favorable debt weapons are always available to us self-employed borrowers. And finally, does this work for loans that I've had for a while? This process works for loans of nearly every type and is effectively beneficial regardless of when you apply the techniques. The longer you delay, the more you will lose to the banks. You've got to stop the bleeding, stop being tricked into thinking that the financially responsible definition that we've been taught is the right way of managing your banking. So how do you benefit? What's next? Well, as long as you have at least $6,000 or more than what you spend per year from all streams of income after all forms of expenses, which is an average of $500 or more monthly, and you have at least one mortgage now or plan to get at least one within the next 18 months, either on a primary residence or any rental properties, and as long as you're coachable and prepare to be courageous, consistent, and patient, then you cannot fail with this. And your next step is to reserve your free coaching session. I'm going to put that link here up on the screen here in just a couple minutes again. So be prepared, because this will be your last chance to register, and especially to get your coaching session with me. What I'm going to do is we're going to use the free tools that we're providing for you, the Cash Flow Cruncher, to essentially analyze your starting point and where you want to end up. And what that does is it allows us the opportunity to reverse engineer which techniques you've been missing and exactly what the value of those techniques are for you. You don't want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars more than you need to. Listen, you got to fight back. And with discipline and accountability, this is guaranteed to work. I do want to reassure you that your privacy is our top priority. This training, the second part, where you provide a cash flow cruncher in advance of that one-on-one call and it's filled out and we're looking at your figures, does not require you to share any dangerous financial information with us. We don't need any account numbers. We don't need any social security numbers. All we need is the data so that we can properly assist you. For those of you that happen to be good candidates for an ongoing relationship with VIP beyond the free coaching session, I want to touch on a couple basic points to that. This process can be easy when you are coached through the small steps. This is not difficult. If you take this on and try and do it on your own, I've been down that path. I did this all on my own, and it became a part-time job. Not only did it become a part-time job, it became an absolute obsession, like a religion, and it turned into a career. So unless you plan on changing your career and spending not only hundreds of thousands and in some cases millions within our business development, it's going to take you years and years longer than it should, because that's how it works when you try and do things on your own. So we want to make that process easy. We do that over a period of a 2-year coaching relationship, and we're actually offering something really exciting here today where we're extending that relationship at no added cost for an additional 6 months. So we work with you for 30 months. You have a delegated coach, the same expert that you work with each and every call. You have an unlimited number of coaching sessions during that period of time, and at the end of each 35 to 45 minute coaching session, your coach will actually break down which exact steps you need to be taking in order to advance yourself before the next call. You complete the homework, you put the results in to the right, and you essentially get online and schedule your next call. It's really pretty straightforward. Whether you have perfect credit or imperfect credit, we will help you optimize your credit profile. The optimization process allows us to then guide you to the proper debt weapon acquisition. So our coaches are there to help guide you to which debt weapons you should be getting, where to be getting them from, when to apply for them, and so forth. We then use those together to accomplish your goals. Now, the credit optimization component of this, we used to sell for $1,500 per person. We now give it to our membership absolutely free. So if you'd rather fast track, and if you're sick of the banks, if you're sick of spending money unnecessarily, if you were impressed by these numbers, if you want hundreds of thousands or even millions back in your pocket in interest costs based on your investment strategies, then at least sign up for your free coaching session. If you do end up working with us on an ongoing basis, then the cost to do so is tax deductible, because we will coach you on your real estate business and how these techniques apply for that business. Furthermore, again, with the unlimited phone coaching sessions, you will be getting the free 6 months added to the any attendee of this webinar for a total of 30 months, where you're getting the expert credit optimization, debt weapon acquisition process, and how to utilize those debt weapons correctly in specific one-on-one customized coaching. The cost is $289 per month. That is with the current discount of the additional 6 months being added. And there are additional rebates and discounts that may apply because of this specific training. So depending on how you fit our coaching mold, we will have that conversation. I have to warn you up front that 2/3 of the people we speak with are disqualified because it's not the right time. So please be prepared for that very realistic possibility. We have more demand for what we sell than we have supply, so we are very selective about who we work with. And those that we do work with, we provide a refund satisfaction guarantee to. So you cannot lose with this. We are there to carry the burden of the risk, which is why we're very selective about which members we choose to work for. Now, one last thing I'm going to do very special for this group, so listen up, is with this training only, as long as you have at least double cash flow, which is $1,000 to $1,500 or more per month, we will be providing a massive discount to Quick Start. Because we have such a delay and a waiting list, we will be providing a $1,500 discount to a payment plan of $289 per month, or a $2,500 discount to the paid in full members. But this is a one-time opportunity. And in order to get access to understand availability, we may not have any availability at the time you see this. So you're just going to have to text. So by the time you text, whatever availability we have may be gone. You've got to text this number, write the number down, 720-435-8791. Now, should you be qualified, should we allow you in, should we have access, and we start working together, if we determine that it was not a good fit, we will backpedal and you'll be refunded. Furthermore, I will be in charge of your very first coaching session, so you will not lose the opportunity to go through that 90-minute call with me in the very beginning to analyze that compatibility again. So shoot over a text. You don't have anything to lose. You have everything to gain. Tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars back in your pocket, and even in some cases 7 figures. So let's go through one last time this checklist. You've got one chance to get a free coaching session. It is a no sales, no pressure, personal game plan, phone-based coaching session, one-on-one. You will also be then eligible for additional classes about specific debt weapons, which would obviously be useful, as I'm sure you can see. And you will be getting your free Cash Flow Cruncher gift for attending here today. This is a limited time only second part to this training that you can access through freesessioncalendar.com, and all who register through this training alone will get their session with me personally. We do have limited availability. It is first come, first serve. If you have any trouble registering, simply visit this phone number, 866-969-2738. So I'm going to go back to the last slide again here, show you my phone number. This is the text number for any availability, 720-435-8791. You're going to text that if you have at least $1,000 to $1,500 worth of current average cash flow and you're ready to get started right now. If you have that type of cash flow, there's no reason for you to delay. So you're going to get started. You're going to get a huge discount to do so, but you've got to text to see if we have any availability. So text this number. For those of you that do not know where your cash flow position stands, then just simply register for your free coaching session now, and you will be provided an analysis at no cost with me personally. I very much appreciate all of the time you spent with me on this training, and as you can see, this will play an instrumental role in your ability to not only dominate the banks, but really dominate your plans and your objectives pertaining to both real estate investing and cash flow optimization. Thank you very much again for your time. We look forward to speaking with you during the second part to your training.